Welcome to Constel English, a telecourse for the language teachers of English. Constel, or the Continuing Studies in Education via Television, is a project of the Philippine government, of which the implementing agency is the People's Television Network in cooperation with the Department of Education, Culture and Sports, the Philippine Normal University, the University of the Philippines, De La Salle University, and the Foundation for Upgrading of the Standard of Education, or FUSE. Constel English is the fourth of these interagency projects. This English telecourse was conceived to further equip language teachers across levels with knowledges and skills in the teaching of the four macro skills, namely listening, speaking, reading, and writing, with the inclusion of grammar, literature, and language testing. The telecourse, which consists of these 7 segments, has a total of 45 episodes of 1 hour each episode. Each segment has 7 or 8 episodes altogether. To name a few of these, we have the following: the teaching of critical listening, the teaching of reading comprehension, recreatory reading, children's literature, and remedial reading. The telecourse likewise offers approaches, strategies, and techniques in the teaching of speaking, with topics such as oral communication strategies, one-way and two-way communication, and the teaching of public speaking. The writing component, on the other hand, has topics like the process approach to writing, writing from an outline, and marking compositions. The telecourse will also show you how to teach grammar and literature, and how to test all of these macro skills. You will certainly find the episodes meaningful and interesting because of the many classroom situations with which you can relate and which you can identify yourselves with. These classroom scenes crystallize the language learning theories which establish the framework for teaching of each component. Another significant feature of Constel English is the provision for the TSMs, or the teaching support material, which will certainly reinforce and enrich the 45 telelessons. So, my fellow English language teachers, may I invite you to Constel English, a must for the teachers of English like you and me.
They say that this shell has lived long enough in the ocean to capture the various sounds of the deep blue sea. Well, perhaps you've also heard of the story that you could press your ear against the old walls of St. Paul's Convent in Vigan and hear the voices of the nuns who sang their prayers there every day 100 years ago. Sounds make such an impact in our lives that a world without them is unimaginable. And yet, how many of us actually take time to listen? Hi, welcome to the first episode of the Listening Component. I'm your host, May Fernandez Legaspi. Let me take you to a school where a group of students are gathered for an English class. I'm sure many of you have had experience of lecturing before a class that may have someone who is quite occupied with something else, or one who is more interested in what his seatmate has to say, and perhaps a student who is just totally lost in thought somewhere. These students can obviously hear what their teacher is saying, but they are not listening.
Class, I gave you a selection to read at home, didn't I?
Yes, ma'am.
So kindly bring out your books and then turn your books to page 30. Can I now ask for a volunteer to read the page in front of the class? Okay, Raul, kindly come up here and read the page in front of your classmates. You may now begin to read the page.
It was dark outside and no one was around. Ramona walked slowly towards the lamppost.
Excuse me, Raul, but what page are you reading from?
Page 13, ma'am.
Oh, I said 30, not 13, Raul.
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, but I thought it was page 13. But let me do that again.
Okay.
What you have just seen is an example of someone who just went through the initial process of effective listening. Raul paid close attention to his teacher's message, processed the message in his brain, and understood the instruction. However, Raul did not hear the message properly. He heard 13 instead of 30. He may have heard and added the sound of the letter N at the end of the word 30. Well, the listening component will make you see the reasons why Raul failed to hear the right message. In this episode, you will be taught what listening is as a process. Now, let me take you to a science class in high school.
Class, today we will learn about alcohol and how it affects man. Tony?
Yes, ma'am.
Kindly stand. What do you think will happen if somebody rubs alcohol on his arms and legs, especially if he does it often?
Ma'am, my older brother doesn't rub alcohol on his skin. He drinks it.
Oh, Tony, what do you mean by that?
Ma'am, my older brother drinks alcohol, but on occasions only.
Oh, I know what you're saying, Tony, but that is not what I mean.
Now, what you have just seen is an example of what happens when two parties communicating with each other have different background information or knowledge. The teacher expected another meaning of alcohol. However, Tony thought of another kind of alcohol, the intoxicating beverage that people drink, such as wine or whiskey. We can conclude from Tony's answer that he did not interpret the teacher's question correctly. Now, if Tony and the teacher shared the same background information, Tony would have given a reply similar to this.
Ma'am, if someone rubs alcohol on skin too often, I'm afraid skin will become very dry.
So, what then is listening? Well, we can tell our students that listening is this. It is an activity of paying attention to and getting the right meaning from what they hear. And we might also tell them that if they don't listen effectively, they will most likely miss a lot of important information. The question now is, how then does one listen effectively? Tell your students to remember these important points that we have just learned about effective listening. First, they must pay close attention to what they hear. Then, they must process the message and try to understand what it is all about. And then, they should interpret the message. Lastly, they must give an appropriate response to the message. Well, if you had been listening effectively over the last few minutes of this program, you would get those items down correctly. Next in our agenda, we will be talking about why people listen. Keep tuned!